Welcome back, y'all. Finally able to film, and today's video is going to be all about going back to my non-aero brake lever setup. I want to relay my experience going back to these levers and if it has convinced me this second time around to stick with them. So stick around and hope you learn some details that you won't find anywhere else. This bike in my last video, I did mention that the brake hoods were actually not original to the Shimano non-aero brake levers, and they're actually produced by Soma, so they're new and they work so well with these Shimano brake levers. I think the model is something goofy like BL-Z304A, something like that, but I can confirm after long-term use it still works perfectly and they're super snug. And Soma made the rubber on the tops of the hoods a lot thicker, so the comfort is way better than the Diacomp, however you say it, brake levers I used in the past. And then also, even though they're aero brake levers, the Suntour Cyclone brake levers, those were super uncomfortable, and these are way better. Now I will say the Shimano SLRs have these beat by just a little bit, but for non-aero brake levers, if that's your setup, definitely recommend it. It is interesting though because Soma put a Campagnolo style logo on the insides or the outsides. I think they're reversible, but that's what's funny. On Shimano brake levers there's a Campagnolo logo, but still a quirky little detail on my setup. Again, they may not be as thick as the Shimano SLR brake levers, but they're thick enough where you can sprint from the hoods. Although it's not ideal, and especially if you're going this vintage, primarily the drops are where it's at when you're sprinting. But that being said, a key detail in regards to non-aero brake levers that might turn some people off is when you're going to reach for the hoods, you kind of have to be precise. You can't be too sloppy and kind of grab anywhere. You have to make sure the webbing between your thumb and pointer finger isn't going to hit the cable, because you can actually bend it if you plant wrong, if that makes sense, on the hoods, and it just doesn't allow too much leeway when reaching for the hoods if you're not looking. You can make it a muscle memory habit, but honestly it kind of gets tedious, especially when you're fatigued at times. So given I've used aero brake levers multiple times in the past, you may be wondering why I went with the non-aero brake levers. Well, this bike came with it. It was OEM as well, so I wanted to stay original, and it gave me an incentive to try them again. But this bike came out in '86, and slowly the aero brake levers were coming out as well. So I'm sure whoever bought this new in the past probably upgraded pretty fast, given when this bike was released and when that tech was coming out. So a pretty obvious difference is the brake cables aren't routed under the bar tape, and that's actually something that I'm still not used to. It's not a huge deal, but it does still feel weird even right now, where when I'm grabbing the tops of the bars, it's just a lot thinner than what I'm used to. But that being said, the trade-off is if you have to do any cable maintenance with your brakes, you don't have to unwrap your bar tape. And speaking of brakes, these still work extremely well, braking from the hoods and then also from the drops. So even with the single pivot brake calipers, I have zero complaints with them. So of course, being in Florida, there's really not that many long climbing hills in my area at least, but the few rolling hills I do have climbing from the hoods is pretty average. It's not uncomfortable, but it's not the most comfortable I've ever ridden with, but it's perfectly in the middle for comfort when climbing in the hoods. Another thing that it's still tough to get used to, and I don't think I'm quite there, is where the cable housings go up and towards myself, the rider, and when it gets close to the tops of the bars, moving your hands in that section, you kind of bump into it. Sometimes my fingers will get stuck on it and everything. I haven't had any close calls, but I could imagine that someone could get their fingers snagged, pull the bars sideways, and really eat it. So that's just some factor that I don't know. I'm still trying to decide, but ultimately I still can't decide if I could compromise with that or not, especially when I'm putting on the sweat protector. When I get on my rollers on this bike, the cable housings do get in the way of everything. Overall though, if I didn't have something lined up after these brake levers, I probably would keep them. I can't complain too much. Even the little complaints that I did say, I could probably deal with it, even with the housing getting in the way at times with my grip. But I'm not quite home yet, so I'll chat real quick more about the Raleigh Technium, how I've been liking it, and then at the very end of the video, I'll reveal what's going to be replacing these non-aero brake levers. Now the Kenda tires on this bike are actually really good. I have no complaints. Again, I'm not racing, I'm not trying to shave off grams and everything, but I think it's efficient enough and super comfortable too. They measure out to be around a 28C, even though they're 27-inch tires. If you notice in this video, my pedals are different now. I replaced them with the Shimano PD-R540. These part codes are goofy, but I replaced them. I think that's very fitting, especially with the color. It looks fantastic. And it actually matches with the color of the frame set too. But speaking of the frame, it having the aluminum triangle, steel fork, steel chain stays and seat stays and stuff, it is pretty close to a steel frame set, but there definitely is a little bit of a difference where it feels a little more hollow, if you would say. It's kind of hard to describe, but by no means it's noodly, because they did oversize the tubes to compensate. So it is plenty stiff and it's pretty compliant too. So it's not super harsh, but again, it's just this very odd feeling, especially when I'm sprinting or climbing. It's just different. A hollow feeling. That's all I could boil it down to describing it. Of course, I'm not getting rid of it anytime soon, but it definitely hasn't converted me to any aluminum bonded frame sets. Definitely want to get a steel frame set in the distant future after I've really thrashed this bike. Oh, I forgot to mention too, again, I've stuck with 27-inch wheels on here. I really can't tell the difference. Totally fine. They're aluminum too. They're not the old school steel rims. So luckily I don't have that extra weight, and they're spinning so efficiently and quite nicely too. Again, I've searched so much online to see if any of the road frames, the bonds coming undone. I've seen crashed photos and the bonds are still together. The Raleigh Technium mountain bikes I've seen come undone, but that's something that's going to take abuse, of course, especially with mountain biking and some of them not having suspension, so I can see that. But as far as the road bike, I'm not too concerned. Plus, for the sake of posterity and the cycling community, I'll definitely report if anything happens to this frame, because it started off pretty much as new. It's still in mint condition, so if anything pops up, if bonds come undone, I'll definitely report it. But let me officially head back, conclude this video, and definitely reveal what's going on this bike next. All right, like I mentioned earlier, I want to show you one more detail in regards to the non-aero brake levers on this bike, and especially when it rains or the weather's really poor out here in Florida, and I want to use the bike rollers. If I put my sweat catcher and rag where I normally put it, it does clash with the brake cable housing. So it gets a little bit cumbersome as opposed to when I had aero brake levers. I could just throw the sweat rag on there, wipe my face. And again, that detail where the cable housings are in the way, and sometimes I'm a little fatigued moving my hands and I could snag it, and it causes for a squirrely situation on the bike rollers. So just wanted to point that out there. Most people aren't going to use rollers with a vintage bike like this, but still wanted to shine a light on that. Oh, and one more thing before the big reveal is, I don't know if you noticed, I'll show a different shot right here, but the quill stem does have like an extreme negative angle where it puts the bars further down than I would like. And I was under the impression that quill stems are at a negative 17-degree angle, which makes them horizontal. But this quill stem, and even on my old Fuji, the quill stem will cause the bars to be a little lower than I wanted. So I don't know how to really search for it. But if you all have any insights on how to resolve that super negative quill stem angle and finding a quill stem that's more horizontal, let me know in the comments. So moving on to this component that's gonna go on here. Oh, by the way, this is not it, but I'm also gonna put 175 millimeter cranks on this bike after this video is posted. Okay, I'll get to it. But that being said, I do want to thank you so much for watching, subscribing, and liking this videos. I truly do appreciate that and all the support from you all. And as always, I'll catch you in the next video.